Hi, my name is Chris Hutchins, and my report was on considerations for improving employee incompetence in the workplace. It was prepared for you, obviously, in Grand Rapids Community College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it was prepared by me, December 10th, 2017. The first part of the report is actually a memo that goes out to you, and it's from me, dated today. The subject is Report on Improving Employee Incompetence in the Workplace. The report basically is talking about how you authorized this report on September 6th. Current journals from business research databases were examined, and surveys were found regarding the problem of incompetence. The report discusses different problems that arise from having a staff or corporate culture that displays incompetence. Counter-arguments that incompetence is beneficial to the workplace are also addressed. Several examples of organizations that have suffered from major incompetence will be displayed. And lastly, recommendations will be made for how to improve the growing issue of business incompetence. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share with you my research and findings. I am confident this report will enlighten you in why and how companies decide to combat incompetence. And then this is attached to the main report. So then the report goes on to the content section, which includes the executive summary, the introduction, the purpose of the study, the scope of the study, the definitions, methods and procedures, findings with the background on the incompetence, how it affects the bottom line, measures that can be put in place to stop this from happening, and the big picture, and then an analysis with a summary, conclusions, and recommendations, and then references. And then lastly is the appendices. So Appendix A is research and publishing and incompetence, and then Appendix B is an interview questionnaire. So the executive summary basically talks about GRCC, because that's who I'm, talking to, you and GRCC, and how long GRCC's been operating for, and then the class that I'm in, about how we're tasked with a formal report, and how we've been authorized to research the topic and compile the report based on the findings. And the research was conducted based on research databases and web-based articles. First, the background on incompetence, and then how it affects the bottom line. And then third, measures that can be put in place. And fourth, the big picture. And then the findings conclude that business incompetence has become a norm due to lack of training on ethics and job requirements. This problem can be addressed with a focus on increased top-down interaction and improved training procedures. Based on my findings, companies should proceed with plans to increase overall performance supervision and interaction from a top-down approach. Companies need to look at revising their current training policies to focus on ethical standards and moral codes, along with making sure employees are fully able to perform their job by the end of the training period. This will greatly reduce incompetence in the business world within the coming years. So the introduction is incompetence in the workplace is a growing problem in a world that's growing so fast. Companies need to find ways to curb this incompetence, which will in turn create a more efficient and profitable work environment. While companies may know the need to work on improving incompetence, they may not know the best method for doing such work. So the purpose of the study is to examine the different causes and the best methods of solving these. The answers to the following questions are provided. What is incompetence? How does it affect the workplace? What methods can be used to lower incompetence rates? And how can you maintain methods in an ever-changing business world? The scope of the study, it's limited by the assignment, which is 14-week from the start of the semester that we've had, and no availability of a research budget. The topic is fairly far-reaching, and the research is broad, using many sources. The one definition is incompetence, which is the lack of the ability to do something well, and that was taken from dictionary.com. So the methods and procedures. The secondary research will be conducted through traditional and electronic searches. The databases and search engines will be used to gather scholarly data from the business world. And my findings, business incompetence is a growing problem. Many disadvantages have been found by companies dealing with this issue, along with a few advantages. The largest challenge to organizations is figuring out how to combat this incompetence shown by their employees to help maintain their reputation and success. The background on incompetence in the workplace. Incompetence in its most general form is a lack of the ability to do something well. Other terms include being inferior, lacking, or unprofessional. The main type of incompetence is going to be laid out in this report relates to business incompetence. When looking at incompetent managers, these 10 habits are the most common. So, bias against action, secrecy in the workplace, oversensitivity, love of procedure, preference for weak candidates, focus on small tasks, allergy to deadlines, inability to hire former employees, addiction to consultants, and long hours. So I go on to explain the 10 habits. The first one being the bias for action, which means that incompetent managers don't act when necessary. There's a quote by David Ogilvy: "A good decision today is worth far more than a perfect decision next month." Secondly, secrecy is a sign of trouble in a company, especially when the managers say they can't tell the rest of the staff and they're keeping everything confidential. This makes companies political, anxious, and full of distrust. Third, we have oversensitivity, which is not being honest and upfront because you're too afraid to hurt somebody's feelings. When things aren't handled right away, they grow and more problems arise. Love of procedure was number 4, which is basically you're so stuck into the rules that you don't know how to have any kind of flexibility whatsoever. So the 5th issue is preference for weak candidates, because you're too afraid of somebody coming in and taking your job, having better knowledge or doing a better job than you. The 6th, the focus is on small tasks, relates to the point that a lot of people just do small tasks instead of the main job to make it look like they know what they're doing when they don't. And then for number 7, it's an allergy to deadlines, because nobody likes deadlines, so people just try to push it back, but that's a very incompetent thing to do instead of working hard and making sure you're getting things done on time. So number 8 is the inability to hire former employees, because sometimes, if you know somebody and for whatever reason, you want to hire them back in, people are too afraid to take that step. So number 9 was the addiction to consultants, which is basically you're too afraid that your decision might not be right, so you hire somebody else to kind of go through that process with you, and that just takes a lot more time and it's also more costly. And then lastly, we have long hours, which is an issue where people think they're doing a great thing by staying late, but really it should be more of time management, and there's got to be a better way to do it. So how this affects the bottom line: it hurts the company's bottom line in numerous ways, but also has been said to help as well. So the disadvantages: it can cause drama in the workplace, a lot of conflict between employees, business failure. So as time goes on and more mistakes happen from incompetence, you're likely to fail. Your reputation will definitely be hurt, so the image of the company, and your harm to others. So like with GM, they had a recall that they didn't issue for years and ended up killing at least 13 people, and that's something that was because of some employees in the company that try to keep things hush-hush. So even considering all the costs, there are some people that believe that it's the key to success, and these people think that the advantages are being incompetent means that you're not doing your job the way that the status quo says you do your job, but you're still being very creative. You might be different than everybody else, but that's not always a bad thing. And you're very adaptable because of the fact that you're adaptable to change. You don't have that specific way that you have to do things. So, both of those are, good advantages to, incompetence. But for the most part, you do see the disadvantages affecting the bottom line. So, some measures that can be put in place to help combat this issue. The first one is a certified personal coach. So a lot of bigger corporations and companies can have these coaches that will be there for you every step of the way to walk you through and make sure that you're getting that training that you need, make sure that everything is going as planned, you get that support, that way you know what your job actually is, and you also can get through that emotional stuff as well. And then also counselors, mentors, or peer conversations can really help. So just involving the whole team, involving the employees can really help to bring that closeness together and have people be a little bit more cohesive. And then improve training programs. I think that's a big one. We have to focus on ethics training and the difference between right and wrong, moral codes, because even though it seems like common sense, we still have a big problem of people trying to get away with things on a day-to-day basis. So even though companies have these training procedures in place, they might not have taken it to the extent that they need to make sure that they're keeping up with the times, make sure that they're, getting all this material taken care of, and updating it as need be. So the big picture here is that real-world companies have been dealing with this issue for a very long time, but it seems that with technology, it's getting worse and worse and worse. So it could be like an older accountant that can't figure out a new software, or it could be an employee that was thrown into a promotion, a new position. They have little to no training, and they can't figure it out. But on a large scale, these things can be very, very costly. Considering, like, one example, the EPA in 2015, they came under fire because they allowed 3 million gallons of wastewater into the Animas River in Colorado. This spill happened because a contractor had breached a wall that was holding back wastewater from an abandoned mine. And so originally they thought it was only 1 million gallons. It ended up being 3 million gallons. And the total cleanup could cost taxpayers almost $30 billion by the time it's all said and done. So if you think about that, it was only one person, but it created this huge mess because they didn't know what they were doing. Maybe they weren't trained well enough on it. Then with GM, they had to fire 15 employees, and they had to create a victims' compensation fund because they failed to report the ignition switch recall until it was too late, until 13 people had been, killed by it because they were trying to hide it within the company. And then the last one is actually very interesting. It takes a bunch of professors that were heads of chairs and around the country, and they did a mail survey. And what they found out was professors that had had a longer time within the organization, within that faculty, they actually had worse qualities of work because they were expected to produce a higher quantity, and so their quality went way down. So their incompetence grew because of their experience, which doesn't make sense, but it does only because they were being pushed to their limits. They weren't in the situation that they should have been in. So that's a very interesting study, which also I have a data table later on that will kind of explain that. So it goes into detail about what the two variables are and how, in other words, chairs from departments that focus on the quantity appear more likely to report that their tenure shields their incompetence, whereas chairs of departments that emphasize quality have a greater tendency to state that tenure does not protect the incompetent. So it's very interesting. And then the summary is that this report set out to research the impact of incompetence and find ways to reduce it. And research was gathered through the online and database sources. Real-world examples were pulled to give application to problem at hand, as well as opposing argument that incompetence is beneficial to companies. A study looking at tenure of faculty and their quality of work was used for numerical data. Solutions were composed to help companies decide on what actions they may take to reduce this incompetency. And my conclusions were that from the data and the real-world examples and the research involving methods of improving incompetence, it can be stated that the inability of people to do their jobs and do them well should be of grave concern to any company hoping to be successful. If no action is taken, not only could your reputation suffer, you could lose your employees, you could go out of business, and possibly be responsible for somebody's death. So in a world that changes so much, management needs to have resources in place to keep employees well maintained, just like you should your car. Billions and billions of dollars have been lost due to mistakes that could have been prevented if employees would have received correct training. So my recommendations: the findings of this report, for a small company, they would at least need to update and work on their training policy to improve that, to have the ethical standpoint in there, as well as a little bit more of that job-specific training. And then for a little bit bigger companies, they definitely could have that coaching along with some other like employee get-together programs or integration programs. So I feel like even back in 2009, Stuart Diamond, a Harvard-trained attorney, spoke at Grand Valley about the connection between ethics and incompetence. And so there's definitely a lot of people talking about it, but it's still not hitting those companies the way it needs to yet. I mean, there's scandals every day. There's more and more, so we need to all get on board here and try to, weed out the problems. So then the references, there's 10 different references here. They're all just, going through. Over 5 of them were from the GRCC database that was the ProQuest database, and then the rest of them were just ones I found online or from different sources. And then the appendix at the back has a interview questionnaire, which is Appendix B, which says, like, what is the history of GRCC's training policies? What is the primary way GRCC handles incompetence? What are some costs and benefits of GRCC having an incompetent staff? How does GRCC train new staff? Do you feel these measures are adequate? What advice would you give a company dealing with incompetency? And what other comments would you like to add? And then the Appendix A is just the data table, which shows the change in the probability of incompetence based on the number of articles. So the more it goes up, the change in incompetence changes as well. So that's about it. That's the report, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.